So I'm going to show you how to make this really great love pillow. First of all, we're going to decide where we want this square on the fabric. You could have it in the center, you could have it off to one side, it really is up to you. So let's just put our backing fabric to one side. So I think I'm going to put mine in the center. I'm going to pin this in place. Pins about 3 inches apart, like this, maybe 2 on each side, and they should all be going in the same direction, meaning this way, that you'll follow the direction. So when you turn it in your machine, it's easy to take the pins out. If that doesn't make sense, you'll see when you start sewing. Okay, so now I've pinned that on, I'm going to sew it on the machine. And I've actually chosen a nice blue thread because I think it will be nice with the other colours that I've got. You could just use something the same colour as this if you're not happy about your being able to sew a straight line. But I think this will be nice in a decorative stitch. So I'm going to sew this about 1/4 inch from the edge, and I'm going to use my foot on the machine as a guide. Okay, so I'm going to so stop 1/4 inch from the bottom, and with your needle in, lift the foot up and pivot your fabric. That way you won't lose your space. Okay, so again, sew down this side, lining up the edge with the presser foot. And get in the habit of stopping before you remove each pin. Okay, I've seen a lot of people who try to just keep going and do it, and that's when, you know, you go offline. Okay, so stop, look, because you have to take your eyes away when you're taking the pin out, so you're taking your eye away from the needle, and it goes wonky. So again, stop, take the pin out. Pin out. So when it meets up with the other one, I'm just going to do a little backward stitch. Okay, and just clip those threads as you go along. Leave that ready for next time. Okay, so your square is now on the front of your pillow. So now we're going to take our design, which is the LOVE or L Heart VE, and I've already put the fusible paper onto these. So you get your fusible paper, you draw your letters, and make sure to do them backwards. Okay, as if it wasn't difficult enough, you have to do that, and then iron them onto your fabric, peel off the backing, and then your fabric is the right way around. Okay, so I already peeled the back off that one. And this is the lightweight fusible paper which you can sew through. You can also get a heavier weight one which is not for sewing. So just make sure you get the one that you want. If you're not happy to sew around these letters with the machine or by hand, then I would advise you to get the heavier weight one. So let's put these in place. Just put them wherever you want them. And when we're happy with this, we're going to take it over to the ironing board and just iron these in place. And just remember that if you're using the lightweight fusible paper, it's merely to hold it in place while you stitch. It won't, like if you know, after a while they will come off if you just leave it without stitching. Okay, so we're going to take this over to the ironing board. Just make sure everything's nice and lined up. Turn the steam off your iron when you're using the fusible paper, and just carefully iron each piece. Just do it gradually, because sometimes when you try and do too much at once, they roll up. So I'm just kind of using the tip of the iron. And the heat releases the glue, melts the glue, and that fuses it together. Now, it is possible to do this too much and to have a big brown burn mark on your project, so just be careful. And if you have kids doing this, obviously supervise them. Whoops. It's fine. My iron is just having a moment. You can just iron those wet bits. Okay, so that's nicely sticking onto there. Okay, so we're actually going to now sew these on. Now, to sew on the letters, we can either use the machine, and we can use an applique stitch, which I really like, or else on this one you can see how I've done it by hand. So at this time you can choose to do either or. On this one I've just used nice coloured embroidery threads and just done straight stitches. But I'm going to show you how to applique it on the machine. So again, I've got this nice blue thread ready to go in my machine, and I'm going to put it onto a zigzag stitch. I'm going to make the length number 1 because I want them to be quite close together, and I'm going to make the stitch width around 4. But you can experiment a little bit, maybe on a scrap, just to make sure you get the right size before you start this. So I'm going to lower the needle where I want it, and I'm going to start stitching. And it takes a little bit of practice to be comfortable with this, but I've come to a corner, so I'm going to swivel my fabric. I'm just going to trim that end bit there so it doesn't get caught up. And I'm turning the machine so that with the needle in, so I don't lose my place. And just slowly guide it around any bendy bits. Coming down to the point. You can use the wheel on your machine just to give you a bit more control. I just want to go one more over. Okay, so needle in, foot up, swivel your fabric. Slow down. If you're afraid that when you put your foot on the pedal that it goes too fast, use your hand, turn the wheel on the machine towards you. See, I speeded up there on the straight bit. Okay, down to the end. Little reverse stitch at the end. and see how great that looks. So you could change have different color thread for different letters, but I'm going to stick with the blue. Again, needle in, foot up, swivel. See how now as I'm coming around the curve on the heart, I'm just going a few stitches because it's quite a sharp curve. I'm using between the wheel and lifting the foot and swiveling with the needle in so I don't lose my place. I'm just going gradually around the curve. It's like driving. If you go around a bend, you slow down, don't accelerate. Okay, so make sure you get round. Don't try and just push your fabric around because it won't work. Okay, one more. Just get that one out of the way. Again, and stop with the needle on the outside of the heart, on the outside of the curve. And don't beat yourself up if it's not perfect. It's handmade. Okay, stop on the outside of the curve, pivot. I think there'll be one more pivot here for me. Trim those, and my heart is done. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with the other two letters in exactly the same way. Okay, my thread has run out on the bobbin. Okay, the E is done. Actually looks quite cool on the back too. And finally we'll do the V. Let's just get that out of the way. Whoops. Lift and pivot. Stop right at the corner on the outside, lift and pivot. On the corner, lift and pivot. And also be careful not to get your fabric caught up underneath. Hold on, this goes round a bit. Trim this. Okay, and all my letters are on. So once you've finished embellishing the front, and if you want to add buttons or sequins or beads or anything else, you could do some more stitching around here. Finish all that first before you sew the pillow together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make the edge for the fastening and to insert the pillow. So to do that, we're going to take a hem on the bottom of this piece and on the back of the pillow. So we're going to go over to the ironing board. So here, remember, we're going to do the bottom of the pillow is where the pillow is going to be, the insert is going to go, and the ribbons are going to go too. So we're going to put that onto the face down, the right side down, and take a hem here. So we're going to do like a 1/2 inch and then another 1/2 inch. And I'm going to put the steam back on the iron. I like it, especially this fabric. It's like a linen-y kind of blend. Steam helps. And then we're going to turn it over again. And if you feel like you can't judge where 1/2 inch is, you can always draw a line first. Okay, so that's one, and we're going to do exactly the same on the back of the pillow, which is in your contrasting fabric. Okay, so this is my fabric. I'm going to turn it over. Half an inch and another 1/2 inch. Like that. Okay. So now we're going, at this stage, before we sew along here, we're going to insert the ribbons for tying. So you take your ribbon. I'm just going to make sure the end of mine is nice and straight. Like that. And I'm going to measure 4 inches in from the end for this. So on my cutting mat, which is great for this, you can see each square is 1 inch. So I'm going to go for 1 inch here, or 4 inches I mean, and I'm going to pin that. And I'm going to take 4 inches from the other end and put the other ribbon there. Pin in place and put a pin in the middle, and we're going to sew a nice straight line down there. I'm going to pin the back exactly the same. So let's line it up. So 4 inches in. And where's the other one? Here. Now at this stage I'm just going to double check and make sure that these are matching. Oh, that's because I have a seam allowance there. So actually what I'm going to do is make this one just line it up there so that they're going to meet up when you sew the pillow together. Okay, so I have both sides pinned and I'm just going to stitch along this line. I still have my blue thread in, which is okay, but I'm going to put it back on a straight stitch. Stitch length of 2 and 0 width. You don't need to do a reverse stitch. I'm going to line up my presser foot on this side of the seam. It's always good to have something to line it up with, whether you use the markings on your machine or some part of the presser foot. Pin out. And then we're going to do the same with the back. Stop to take your pin out. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to just flip over the ribbon, and it just makes them sit better when your pillow is finished. So we're going to put a pin in. So I'll show you that again. So where the ribbon was on the back, I flipped it to the right side and pulled the ribbon out and laid it down and put a pin in. And we're just going to do a little row of stitching over each one of these just to keep the ribbon in the right place. So just over the ribbon along the top edge of the fabric, and you will need to do a reverse stitch. So go forward and reverse a couple of stitches along the top of the ribbon and reverse. So it's just about the width of the ribbon that you did the stitching for. Okay, see how that's now held nicely in place. So I'm going to do that the same for this one. And again, it's on this top edge of the pillow, or of the edge. Okay, so forward, back, a couple of stitches, forward, back. And trim the threads. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same. Oops, trim that thread too. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same for this one. So just take the ribbon out from underneath the pillow. Put a pin in there. Okay. Okay, needle down at the edge of the fabric, pin out, go forwards, back a couple of stitches, all the way to the end of the ribbon, and back 2 or 3 stitches, and forward 1 or 2 stitches. And clip the threads. Last one. Needle in, pin out, forwards then backwards to the end of the ribbon, a couple of back stitches and forwards. And you want to make sure that that's nice and neat because it will show on the outside of your pillow. Okay, so that's how it should be. So on the back, on the inside, it's nice and neat. You don't have any raggy edges. And on the outside, it's nice and neat too. Okay, so last step, we're going to sew the pillow together, so the front to the back. So we keep our ribbon out of the way. And we're going to put them right sides together. Now, I know mine's I have a little extra here which I might trim off. But we measured our ribbons before and we know that they are in the right place. So what I'm going to do is pin them, or around them. And I think actually I'll put a pin in here too, just to keep it out of the way. Okay. So let's have these, make sure these edges are matching. That's the 2 top edges. And just smooth it out nicely. Now this linen has a little bit of movement in it, so it tends to go a little bit wibbly wobbly sometimes. But just do your best to pin the fabric together. And pins every about 3 inches. And again, all going in the same direction. And then I'm going to, starting with this end, I'm going to just stitch a nice row of stitching all the way around. Now I'm going to leave the blue thread in, but it won't show on this, so it doesn't matter what colour thread you use on here. Okay, so pin out, start at the end, and you're going to go forward and then do a reverse stitch. Okay, so forward, back, and then forward. Use one of the guides on the side here to keep your fabric nice and straight. Stop when you get to the pin. your edges should be matching here. Pin out, and when we get to the end, do some reverse stitches. Okay, and those pins can come out. They were just holding the fabric in place. So we'll undo those, trim the loose threads. And as usual, whenever you're sewing a square, you need to trim the corners. I'm going to trim down here. I should have probably done this before I sewed the pillow together, just to make that nice and neat. And the same here. Not that anybody's going to be really looking inside your pillowcase, but you never know. And I'm going to trim the corners, not cutting through your stitches. Okay, just close to it, and that makes it less bulky when you flip it. Okay, so once we're happy with that, we flip this and we're going to go over to the iron and give it a really good iron. That is the most important part here. And I'm just going to use my scissors just to push out those corners, get it nice and pointy, make it a nice square. Like that. Just be careful not to go through. And we're going to iron this. Okay, let's get the iron going. So again, this is where you're going to take your time, as always, when you're ironing, just to pull out the seams. And press. So just use your nails to get in there and okay, this makes all the difference to your finished product. So again, this side, use your nails. Just pull out the little bit of close to the stitching, the seam, as you can. Use your steam on the iron. See how nice that's going? And the ironing is often a step that people miss out. They think they don't need to do it, but it really does make a huge difference. Okay, look how nice that is now that I've ironed it. And okay, so we've got to this stage. There's one last thing that I'd like to do, and that is on the ends of your ribbon. It's a nice finishing touch just to give them like a little V. So you just fold it in half and cut like that, so you get this kind of little point. Okay. And also, it stops the ribbon from fraying. Oops, that way. If you leave it just straight at the end, it will unravel. Okay, so when you put your pillow in there and you tie your ribbons, your love pillow is going to be all ready. And it's going to either be like this, or this is another variation that I showed you earlier. And another little thing that I did on here was I put little embroidery stitches around the edges. So it all depends on what you want to do, what kind of fabric you're using, and how much time you want to take over it. But it's a great project. Kids love it.